Katarzyna Domeracka was born on June 23, 1983 in Warsaw. She was raised in a happy and loving family. After the birth of Kasia's younger brother, her parents decided to live separately. However, this was not due to marital problems. The decision was due to the fact that the apartment they had lived in up until then was too small for a family of 4. So Kasia moved in with her father, and her mother took care of her little son. This separation did not negatively affect the relations between the family members. However, it caused the girl's bond with her father to be very strong. When the girl was 10, tragedy struck. Kasia's father died in a car accident. It was a huge blow to his wife and children. However, life had to go on. The Domeracka family could count on the support and help of their loved ones. One of them was a well-known Warsaw lawyer, Jan W., who was a good friend of her father. The lawyer lived in the neighborhood, so he often visited the Domerackas. Over time, Kasia and her family started to rebuild their lives. After some time, the girl's mother started a new relationship. Katarzyna didn't like her stepfather, so she spent a lot of time with her grandparents. She finished primary school and then started high school. She was liked by her peers and was quite good at school. Katarzyna Domeracka had a boyfriend, Lukas, as did many of her friends. However, there was a few years' age difference between them, which the teenager's mother didn't really like. Shortly before her disappearance, the high school student moved in with her grandparents. This was because she got along better with them than with her mother. The girl's grandparents' house was also much closer to school than her mother's apartment. On May 9, 2000, Kasia told her grandparents that she wanted to go to the Zegers Reservoir with friends. It was only the beginning of May, but the weather that day was nice. The grandparents agreed, but asked her granddaughter to come home by PM, so Domeracka packed sandwiches prepared by her grandmother, a swimsuit, and a few other things, and then left the apartment. The evening came, and then PM Katarzyna did not show up at her grandparents', although she usually kept her word and was punctual. Grandpa and Grandma started to worry. Later, however, they came up with the idea that their granddaughter had probably decided to spend the night at her mother's. So the grandparents went to bed with this thought in mind. When they woke up the next day, they called Kasia's mother. However, it turned out that the 16-year-old had not returned to her family home. So her terrified relatives reported her missing to the police. The police officers who conducted the investigation took the case very seriously from the start. The investigators had a hunch that something bad had happened to the teenager and that someone close to her was responsible for her disappearance. The first suspect was Kasia's stepfather, with whom the missing girl did not get along very well. However, he was quickly ruled out. The man also died shortly after the girl went missing. The officers decided to take a closer look at Katarzyna's boyfriend, so they questioned the young man. The detective conducting the interview felt that the boy was hiding something, so the investigator pressed Yukish, who revealed that he had his girlfriend's diary. It shed completely new light on the disappearance. The notes were shocking and surprised not only the police officers, but also Domeracka's loved ones. Katarzyna described in her diary a relationship with a family friend, the aforementioned Jan W. In a way, the man replaced the girl's deceased father, but over time, the relationship began to develop into something very disturbing. When Kasia was 13, a much older and married attorney began to have a sexual obsession with her. At around 14-15, the girl began having sex with Jan W. The described events were also confirmed by Domeracka's closest friends. The teenager confided in them and told them in detail about this sick relationship. It also turned out that the Warsaw attorney regularly paid Katarzyna money into an account that he created himself. Formally, it belonged to Lucas, Domeracka's boyfriend. Investigators and relatives also learned that the attorney rented an apartment in Warsaw, where he often met with the teenager. The police officers investigating the case discovered that there was another diary kept by the missing woman. Another diary of Kasia was kept by one of her closest friends. It confirmed the earlier picture of the relationship with Jan W. The teenager wrote down the dates and places of meetings with the lawyer in hotels in the second diary. Investigators later checked this information, and it turned out to be true. Signatures of the famous lawyer were found in the hotel registration books. Hotel employees confirmed that the man was accompanied by a girl who looked like Katarzyna Domeracka. The diaries and the statements of Lucas and close friends showed that the missing woman was tired of her relationship with the lawyer. The man promised that he would leave his wife, but time passed and nothing changed in this matter. It did not help that Domeracka sent the lawyer's wife cards that were supposed to prove her husband was having an affair. The irritated Jan W., on the other hand, allegedly hit Katarzyna several times because of this. After obtaining Kasia's private notes, police detectives were almost certain that the Warsaw attorney must have had something to do with the disappearance of the 16-year-old. He certainly had a motive. If the truth about Jan W.'s relationship with the girl came to light, the respected lawyer could lose everything. His marriage would probably end. The media would also start writing about his sick desire, which would certainly affect the reputation of the law firm. The man also faced criminal liability for pedophilia. The attorney also denied having any involvement in Katarzyna's disappearance. He also denied having an affair with her, although the evidence for this was basically indisputable. The police checked Jan W.'s phone records. They showed that he had contacted Kasia almost 200 times in the months before her disappearance. He even called the teenager on the day of her disappearance. The investigators also wanted to question the co-owner of the law firm. At that time, Jan W. appointed him as his attorney, so the man refused to testify, invoking attorney-client privilege. The attorney had used many similar legal tricks. He felt unpunished and very self-confident. However, evidence emerged that could turn everything upside down. Investigators checked the suspect's apartment and his car. It was determined that Jan W. had given the car for a thorough cleaning right after Katarzyna disappeared. However, a hair belonging to Domeracka was found in the trunk. Unfortunately, it was not sufficient evidence of guilt. The police did not give up. Something that looked like blood was found on a pair of the man's trekking shoes. When the lawyer was asked how it could have ended up on the shoes, he seemed surprised. He quickly replied that it was deer blood. At that time, the investigator replied that Jan W. was not a hunter and was not interested in hunting. The lawyer did not say anything to that. The shoe was sent to GDASK, where the only laboratory in Poland at that time that conducted specialist DNA tests was located. Everyone believed that justice would finally be done. Unfortunately, it was different. It was not possible to check whether there was blood on the shoe and who it belonged to. This most important piece of evidence disappeared in unexplained circumstances. Many suspected that Jan W. himself had a hand in this incident, although this could not be confirmed. Above all, however, due to the lack of the shoe, the police did not have any other evidence that could be used to charge the attorney with the murder of Katarzyna Domeracka. The case of the missing 16-year-old is extremely outrageous. Because it is known what happened to Kasia, it is hard to believe that the teenager ran away from home and is still alive today, and who is responsible for her death. Domeracka's case reminds me of the story of Iwona Mogia Lisowska. In that case, everything pointed to the victim's husband, although the body of the missing woman was never found, nor was there any evidence that would clearly indicate the man's guilt. In both cases, the suspects were also people with very strong connections and high social standing. Kasia's story is even more tragic and frustrating because we are dealing with a child here. The girl was used in a disgusting way by a man who was aware that he was allowed to do anything. What is most irritating is that he was not dissuaded from this belief. It is also hard to understand why Jan W. was not charged with pedophilia. From the diaries or testimonies of his friends, it can be stated that the attorney engaged in activities that could be described as such. It is also interesting whether the Domeracka family did not notice any signs that the relationship between Kasia and the family friend was inappropriate. Did they not see the expensive branded clothes or cosmetics that the teenager bought with money from Jan W? Couldn't Łukasz have behaved differently? He knew about the relationship with the attorney and in some way allowed it. For example, he helped with issues related to the bank account. One can also wonder whether Katarzyna's friends should not have reported the situation they learned about from the teenager to adults, although probably few of us would do that and reveal the secret. It is also interesting whether Katarzyna suspected that something bad could happen to her. This is evidenced by the fact that she gave 2 diaries to people close to her. Unfortunately, this outrageous case has the status of being formally unresolved to this day, and it is unfortunately unlikely that it will ever be possible to change this. Thanks for watching. If you found this case intriguing, don't forget to subscribe for more mind-blowing mysteries. And why stop here? Click on one of these videos to uncover more chilling stories. See you in the next one.